roasted garlic and rosemary sourdough focaccia. Let's go. This is my most requested recipe, and it is seriously one of the easiest sourdough recipes you will ever make. Grab yourself a bowl and a digital scale. We're gonna add 125 grams of active starter, and then make sure your scale is zeroed out, and we're gonna add 375 grams of warm filtered water. 375. And then you wanna go ahead and add 20 grams of extra virgin olive oil. There we go. Now take your bowl off the scale, grab a bread whisk or a fork, and give it a good mix. Okay, so once your starter is mostly dissolved in the water, we're gonna go ahead and put it back on the scale, and we're gonna add 500 grams of unbleached flour. 500 grams. Okay, and then last but not least, we're gonna add 12 grams of salt. 12 grams of salt. Okay, so we're finished with the scale. Now I prefer to mix it by hand because I feel like the dough becomes way more of a consistent texture. Mix up your dough until there are no more dry pockets of flour. Once this is good and mixed, I like to take my bench scraper and get the excess off my hands. Then you also wanna take your plastic bench scraper and scrape down the sides of the bowl. All right, and that's it. We're gonna cover it up with a damp kitchen towel or plastic shower cap, and then you wanna let it rest on the counter for 30 minutes, and then you're gonna do 2 sets of stretch and folds, 30 minutes apart. And then once you have done that, you're gonna let your dough rest on the counter for 10 to 12 hours or overnight. You want your dough to fully double in size. I always recommend starting this dough the night before you want to bake it. That way you can get in a couple stretch and folds and let it rest on the counter overnight. And because I plan so well, I already have dough doubled and ready to go. Okay, so the next morning or whenever it's been roughly 12 hours, you want to grab a 9x13 baking dish. Even with the olive oil coated on the bottom of the pan, focaccia does seem to stick to a lot of baking dishes, so I always recommend greasing it with butter first. Make sure you grease the sides too. Now 2 tablespoons of olive oil to the bottom of your baking dish. I always do this to make sure it's nice and coated, and then take your dough and pour it into the baking dish. Okay, so for this next step, you want to let your dough rest on the counter for about 2 to 4 hours. This depends on the temperature of your home, how long this step will take. You just want to see your dough completely spread out and fill the baking dish and rise a little bit more. Now, while your dough is proofing, you want to prep your roasted garlic. Now, there's lots of ways to do this. You can obviously roast a whole head of garlic, but what I like to do is I like to take a handful of garlic cloves and put them in the middle of some tin foil, and then I drizzle this with olive oil and add a little bit of salt, and then I just fold it and seal it up like an envelope. Stick this on the middle rack in the oven and roast it at 400 for about 25 to 30 minutes. Then you want to go ahead and chop up some fresh rosemary. This is from my sweet neighbor's garden, and then go ahead and give it a rough chop. All right, we're prepped and ready. I'll be back. Okay, so it's been about 2.5 hours. We're gonna go ahead and dimple our dough. So this is what the roasted garlic will look like, soft and golden. You wanna go ahead and drizzle the top of your dough with olive oil. And if you have it, you do wanna use like a flaky salt or even a coarse salt. I am unfortunately out right now, so I'm using pink Himalayan sea salt. And then sprinkle with your fresh rosemary. Okay, and then I like to wet my fingertips, and you're just gonna go in with all of your fingers and dimple your dough. And if your dough didn't stretch all the way to the 4 corners, now is a good time to kind of do that with your fingers. And so what I like to do with the roasted garlic, because I don't want it to burn in the oven while it's baking, I like to take each little clove, you can even break them in half, and I like to push them down into the dimples. Okay, and this is what it'll look like. You're gonna bake this at 425 for 30 minutes. Just take it out when it's nice and golden brown. I'll be back. You guys, look at this gorgeous focaccia. The roasted garlic smells so divine. Look how insanely delicious this looks. It is so soft and moist. It is still steaming. I shouldn't have cut into it yet. This is the easiest recipe, and it is so delicious. Let me know in the comments if you plan on making it.